Now we'll go further north to County Leitrim, where there's a tense contradiction between our reliance on nature as a resource and our reliance on it as our home.
I find Doom Mountain and the boglands, they're so majestic. Somebody who hasn't been walking on a bog, if they go up to Doom and if they were to walk 20 yards in on the bog themselves, they would see around them hundreds of species of moss and flora of different colours. It would be like nearly all the colours of the rainbow multiplied just in one fistful, one small area.
That was Joe Sheerin, a member of the Kilty Clogher Community Council and the campaign group Save Doom Mountain. Doom Mountain is a peat bog where there are plans to build a huge wind farm. Joe works in the local heritage centre dedicated to Sean McDermott, and he really loves bogs.
At the same time, these are carbon-rich areas. They're carbon banks, and they hold far more carbon that could ever be saved through the wind energy industry. Their problem is that to build turbines, it means we have to remove the bog. When we remove the bog, we actually release the carbon and it then starts to poison the atmosphere. It also endangers the remaining bog because to create the wind turbines, we have to drain the boglands and remove the peat. And then that allows the water to run out. It puts the area at risk to landslide, bog movements. Any application for a wind farm that I've seen, they get a license for 30 years. Part at the end of it is that they remove the structure of the turbines and everything, but in every application, everything is that they leave the foundation behind. And by leaving that foundation, that means that area can never return to bogland again. Now, bogs take thousands of years, over 10,000 years since the Ice Age, to form. And it takes hundreds of years to restore a bog. Now, if you leave a foundation behind, that means that area can never return to a bogland.
This conversation immediately brought to mind the double standards in the state's policy towards boglands. They try to stop people from cutting turf for local use, to prevent people from using a fuel source that they've relied on for generations. But for any large-scale industrial project that involves peat removal, the state has no issue facilitating it. In the case of Doom Mountain, we'd be looking at the permanent erasure of a part of the bogland and major destruction to the rest. People can't cut and sell turf in the local area, but they can buy German-produced peat briquettes in the local shop, and forestry or energy companies can do as they wish with the remaining unspoilt bogland. This came up in conversation as well with Nuala McNulty, another member of the Save Doom campaign group.
I'm in a group called Save Doom Mountain. We went round all of the people up here, and they feel really aggrieved because some of them were actually brought to court for cutting turf up there. Yeah. And now Gearagh can come in with the blessing of the government and just cover the whole place with turbines, dig up all of the bog, cause landslides. There's a joint venture between Gearagh and the ESB, and they're calling themselves Future Energy. And they have a proposal on the mountain behind me to build 18 giant turbines. There is nothing that size in Ireland or Europe. Now we're talking about bogland on shale rock. It is inevitable that there will be landslides on that. So Gearagh owns some of the land, and some of it is in private ownership. The majority of it is Gearagh owned. And I suppose to add insult to injury, Gearagh have planted a lot of that land with monoculture forestry, which is the other bane of our lives in North Leitrim, and wrecking the biodiversity and wrecking the water quality. So they've planted this land, bearing in mind that Gearagh is semi-state, so we own it. So it's our money, our taxpayers' money have gone into it. So they are plastering Leitrim in monoculture forestry, driving out the biodiversity, polluting the streams.
There's a lot coming up here. Anti-wind farm groups are often accused of being NIMBYists, NIMBY, not in my backyard, or of being anti-progress, of holding back the transition to renewables. But the more you look into this particular wind farm project, the less sense it makes. Of course, it's not just about wind energy, or forestry, or even fracking. Ultimately, it comes down to who controls access to the land, and in whose interests it's being worked. Democratic control is very limited as it currently exists. Citizens are concerned primarily with protection of place, but on top of that fundamental survival position, there's the more complicated issue of who the land is being used for. We see that profit is the primary motivating factor in all of these projects. Why that's a massive problem will, I hope, be clear to you over the course of this series. The government's policy on boglands, if you judge by their actions, is difficult to grasp in its inconsistency. They say all the right words, that bogs need to be protected, when it comes to passing laws that govern the actions of citizens. But when there's a profit to be made, not even areas set aside as protected are safe.
Doon Mountain is a National Heritage Area. It's overlooking Loch Melvin, which is a special area of conservation. And a special area of conservation is that the water from the lake is extracted to feed as drinking water to the surrounding towns. Also, there's protected fish. It's a Gearagh trout. That's found in Loch Melvin. It's not in any other part of the world. And it's unique in that it's a fish with a gullet. So if sediment goes down through the bog and reaches into the lake, it'll kill off this and endanger these species. And also, white crayfish have been found down in the rivers close to Manorhamilton. They're a very important species. And again, the same risk is posed through that species. Doon Mountain and the habitats where the boglands are and the forestry is habitats for hen harriers and buzzards and a large number of protected species. The hen harrier, there's only 125 pairs left in the country, and there's a number up in Doon Mountain, and even the companies employed to do bird watching counts confirm that there are nesting sites in that area.
We have a special area of conservation one side of the mountain. So if there's a landslide and feeder streams to that get polluted, well then we've a huge fish kill in an SAC. This side of the mountain, all of the feeder streams are going to Loch Gill, which is the source of human water for human consumption. So it's an absolute nightmare, and it's as if our government have just woken up and there's a race for renewables. And I'm always a little bit wary of the relationship with big business and with government, because here we are, we have targets, and it's let's get them done quick without really thinking it out. I mean, where's the community-based element of any of this? Leitrim has 4 or 5 community energy groups, one of which I'm a member of, and we're looking at sort of community-based solutions rather than having all of these things foisted upon us. What can we do as a community? But, Grid don't want to know, ASB don't want to know. And not only do you have the wind farm up there, you have everything that goes with the wind farm. So you have battery storage. So you're looking at mining for cobalt, lithium. So you're going to be polluting land in developing countries. All of this has to be connected to the grid. So you're looking at copper, more mining. So as far as I know, or I can't see, or I haven't found any proper study on all of this.
Does it actually even out at the end?
Yeah, I can't see with there's a payoff for some people, and what really guides me too is there's this community scheme where renewable energy companies pay money to community groups, but these companies are so heavily grant aided. It's actually our own money that's coming back, and it's a bit of a payoff, it's a bit of a bribe.
What Nuala is hinting at there is a strategy commonly used by extractive companies when they first come into an area. You'll hear about this in relation to other projects that are covered in the upcoming episodes. These companies do their homework on the area and the people. They send in PR firms first to get to know local leaders and local groups. They sponsor local GAA teams or community events. And as Nuala pointed out, they are embedded in a complex network of extractive projects covering the whole world. Even renewable energy relies on colonial extractive projects, which have their own terrible social and environmental costs. They are not the silver bullet solution they are sold as, unfortunately. The companies behind these projects are always far better resourced than the local population, so anyone attempting to balance the picture for people has a serious fight in their hands. The people of Leitrim at this stage, though, are seasoned veterans, having led a national campaign to ban fracking. There are several groups in Leitrim focused on battling extractive, destructive industrial activity in the county. Love Leitrim was the anti-fracking group. Treasure Leitrim focuses on the recently issued mining licences, and Save Leitrim is focused on forestry. These two campaign groups that you're about to hear from highlight the same fundamental issues: control over land and a narrow focus on profit-driven extraction.
In Save Leitrim, our group is 4 years old now. It was established by a variety of people coming together who saw issues with the social issues, community issues, environmental, biodiversity issues, with the whole forestry pressure in Leitrim. So we looked at how we could tackle the issue. So we did organise kind of protests at some of the forestry companies, at some of the farms that were being planted. We did a couple of public events to raise awareness. And then we looked at, well, how can we change policy? And what we were seeing then was that the licensing system was open to comment and appeal. So we started to look at the licenses that were being applied for, because it's a public process where the public can interact with that. So we started to put in observations on all afforestation licenses. And then we started to see that they were continuing to be approved, despite what we were saying. So the system was very poorly resourced. And there was an awful lot of environmental, ecological and biodiversity issues that weren't being addressed at all in the licensing. So they were just firing them out like confetti. And there was no consideration of what that meant on the ground till we started pointing it out. And I suppose what helped there was that there was a couple of judgments in the European Court that said Ireland was derelict effectively in many ways in applying EU environmental regulation. We started to raise all these issues on licensing, so they started to turn down some of the licenses because they had no option. They were so poorly put together, and they were totally ignoring some of the requirements. And so that began to clog up the system. So it ground the licensing system almost to a halt. And that is what you'd hear in the public domain. So we made an observation on every single licence that went in County Leitrim for about 3 years. We are not doing as many now, but we're more targeted now at what we're doing, and we're going after issues there. And we've gone to the courts as well on judicial reviews on 2 cases.
You'll hear more from Brian in the next episode, speaking on the history of forestry and forestry activism. Around this time, I also went to speak to Eddie Mitchell at his home. Eddie is an activist with Love Leitrim and Treasure Leitrim.
I suppose our situation is that we didn't really know. We have 47 townlands in North Leitrim that are down now for prospecting for gold mine. The company that's doing that has been here since 2014, and we didn't know. We're very busy fighting other battles like fracking and stuff, and we just didn't really know. Like the farmers now in the area that are of interest to them didn't know, you know. So it was a bit of a shock to us that they're.
They've actually been operating in Leitrim since 2014, doing preliminary explorations or whatever.
Yeah, taking rock samples out of streams and walking people's land, and they should have been contacting people, but it appears that they haven't. At least we can't find anybody that they've been in contact with. You know?
And in terms of the lands that they are operating on, are most people against it, or are some people kind of open to the idea? Or?
Well, I suppose it's very new.
Yeah.
So at the moment, people are trying to figure out what it all means, you know, and still no company has never spoken, you know. So people are against it, I'd say, but it's very early, really, to say that, you know. Because we've been fighting fracking since 2011, and all that happened in that campaign, that the legacy of that now has a huge impact here. Like people would have been slower to come out against fracking, you know, even though everybody came out against it eventually. There would have been a period where people wouldn't have understood it, you know. Whereas I think because fracking was such a controversial issue here, we've been sorted through a whole resource extraction campaign, and now they're coming out very quickly against coal mining, you know.
Yeah, ready for it, kind of. And there's been one company operating. What company is that? Do you know?
So Galantis
Galantis.
Gold, yeah.
Right, that name's familiar. They operating somewhere else.
They're operating in Oma.
No, right.
So they have a gold mine in Oma. Seemingly it was an open cast mine for years, and now they're starting to tunnel underground now. So they exhausted everything that they had at the surface, and now they're going down. I don't think it was that successful. I don't think they made a lot of money. You know what I mean? I'd say it's probably hard enough to compete on a global market, you know, with a mine in Ireland.
And I read before when I was up talking to the people in Greencastle there a couple of years ago, so I did a bit of looking into it then, and it said that there is a reasonable quantity of gold. The seams are fairly widespread, but because of the nature of them, it's not like there's a big clump of it in one place. It's all kind of spread out among the rocks, so they're literally scraping the barrels. It's kind of similar to fracking. It reminded me a lot of fracking in terms of how much effort it was going to take to get a relatively small amount of gold out of each patch.
Yeah,
so thinly spread out it is, you know?
Well, we'd have been connected to them because of our fracking campaign. So we would have known a lot of those people long before we ever knew that there was gold mining here. Even though there was prospecting licenses for gold mining here, and we didn't know when we were up there, you know. But I think that using cyanide to remove gold has meant that they can access gold efficiently in, you know, when there's very little gold. What wouldn't have been commercially viable in the past is probably more readily available now when you use cyanide, you know, for processing. We're only starting to figure out all of that, you know. We're only starting to understand what the processes are, you know.
You'll hear more from Eddie and the others in the rest of the series. In the next episode, I'll take you further north to the Sperrin Mountains in Tyrone, where local activists have been fighting a gold mining company for several years now. Their campaign is at a more advanced stage than the one in Leitrim, and there are many lessons to be learned from both. We'll also take a deeper look at the history of capitalist land grabbing here in Ireland. There's no simple, straightforward story here with a happy ending or a sad ending. All of these things are in motion, and by the time you've heard about them, the situation will have changed. You'll find links to the various campaign groups covered in this series on the Turning Earth blog. You'll find that, as well as links to the Patreon and other social media pages, by going to linktree.com/turningearth. That's it for the first episode. Remember, if you want to support the podcast, please subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/turningearth. If you can't afford to subscribe, there's lots of other ways to help. You could leave a review on iTunes or whatever podcast apps you use. And please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, whatever social media you use. But really, the most helpful thing you can do is recommend it to some friends. This is independent media. It doesn't get heard unless the people that listen to it and value it share it with other people. I recently spent 20 quid on an Instagram ad. I might as well have rolled it up and smoked it. I don't think I did that. And most importantly, if these things matter to you, talk to your friends and family about it. What I'd love is if people who don't already agree with this perspective or that are sceptical about climate or environmental issues have a listen to these podcasts. So if you know anyone like that, please share this with them. Lastly, if you want to ask any questions or if you think I got something wrong, please email me at turningearthradio@gmail.com. Stick with us here on DDR. Open Electrics is up next. Slán go fóill.